Welcome back, everyone. It's Andy Deyell here with another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our regular Zoom series where we check in with our wonderful alums all over the United States and all over the world, really, and see what they've been up to since their time at 1180 Delaware here at Canisius High School. I am joined today, a very special guest, by Joe Enright from the class of 1962. Joe is the president of the New York State Golf Association. He is a retired biology teacher in the Depew school systems for 36 years, I believe is what you said, right, Joe?
That's right.
Well, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Andy. It's really appreciated, and I think it's a great program that you are helping carry out.
Thanks. Well, let's just jump right into it. We have a class of 62 was not that long ago, right? So we have to go back a few years.
Okay, if you say so.
You have to go back a few years. Tell us a little bit, Joe, about your youth. Tell us a little bit about how you heard about Canisius, how you got to Canisius.
Well,
and your experience.
I've lived in Western New York my entire life, and I finished up elementary school at Christ the King out in Snyder. And unlike some of my classmates, there was never an issue or even a discussion in my family about where I was going to high school. I was informed that when I finished at Canisius, I would take an entrance exam and I would be going to, or finish at Christ the King, I would be going to Canisius High School. If you knew my father, he was not open to much debate. And I didn't have a problem with it because I had several classmates from Christ the King that were going, including my best friend, Rick Herman, who graduated with me. I ended up Rick's best man in his wedding. And I figured, okay, we'll go. I had never been there. I went down, took the entrance exam. I was very impressed with the building, as I think anybody that walks in there would be.
Sure.
And I did well on the exam, got accepted, and I never did know why, other than the fact that my parents were very great believers in the parochial education. I was never quite sure why Canisius High School was picked. I learned later that my father was very good friends with several of the Jesuits, and one of his very best friends was the legendary John Sturm, Father Sturm, who is in Tim Russert's book, an entire chapter,
Sure.
Was, I think, very influential in having my father direct me there. It also made for a very interesting 4 years while I was there, trying to stay out of trouble.
That's right.
And because whatever happened, my father would know before I got home.
That's right. So tell me a little bit about some of your classes and some of your influential teachers other than Father Sturm.
Yeah, well,
the activities you were
we got, when I got to Canisius, I don't know if it was good or bad. I think they told me I was the second youngest in the class, and a little level of immaturity, I think, went with that. My first year teachers were, the thing that got me probably the most notice was the fact that I took Latin 8 periods a week. That seemed at the time an extraordinary amount. And then the last 3 years, I believe it was 6 periods a week. And if you do the math, that's more than an extra year. So we actually ended up with the equivalent, if you were in a public school, of over 5 years of Latin. You took it as you had it. In my first year, I had Connie McGillicuddy for a couple of subjects and homeroom. And I had a Jesuit scholastic, Mr. McDonough, in sophomore year, geometry. They were very influential on how I focused on things. And I got somewhat involved. I was a little bit of a very, at the time, very shy, kind of, one of these people that stays in the background in high school. And I got involved in a few activities that in hindsight did help me a lot. I was an altar boy in the St. John Berkman Society they had. I did a year on the arena staff. Probably the most influential thing I did is for 2 years, I was in debate. I wasn't at the level of some of my classmates that got up there, including one of my absolute closest friends, the late Tom Elmer. And there were others. I know John Murphy was very big. But those 2 years, I learned a great deal in interscholastic debate, which ended up down the line many, many years later, I think, helping quite a bit. Canisius also insisted in your freshman year that you take a short course in public speaking and oratory. And they even did I remember, a couple-week introduction to Greek. Now, you didn't learn Greek, but one thing I did learn is I learned the alphabet, and that had modest benefits when I was taking all the college science courses, but it also helped. I could read signs when I went to Greece. Didn't know what they meant, but I could pronounce them.
Right.
But there were not nearly the number of organizations and opportunities in 1958 to 62 that the students there have right now. I am very envious when I read the magazine and see the videos with what they have to offer. On the other hand, it was significantly less expensive to go there. Yes, my freshman year, I remember my father complaining that it was $240. I believe my senior year was somewhere in the $280 range.
Sure.
Put into today's dollars, that might be up around $1,000, but nothing like what we have now. But I kind of took a rather linear background approach. I was very active in intramurals for 4 years, and that's sort of how you got to see the other people. I ran track in my junior and senior year, and there were some issues on transportation that was a pain. I was sort of envious of my friends that went to the local public high school at home because they could do all these things. It was a major deal to get buses and things to get back and forth. Ironically, my wife's brother sat next to me for my entire first year, and he had to leave because where they moved to in Tonawanda, it almost was impossible for him to get there.
Wow.
So he had to leave, and then, of course, later on, when we're dating and get married, we reunited and still share our memories of the place. So at Canisius, it was, I'll say, some involvement, a little bit minimal. Went to school many days complaining about the massive homework. They used to send report cards home, and parents had to sign that you did at least 3 hours a night, whether it was true or not. And they pushed, work hard, do this, which I did for my first 2 years. And then junior year, sort of I think I discovered that other things were going on in life. And some of the grades took a big dive. And I was stupid and naive and didn't realize that those teachers knew what I did in freshman and sophomore year.
Right.
And they were somewhat insulting to me about, why are you doing this? And I sort of got back on track in senior year, but that was that.
That's good.
And then I guess I was good at standardized tests. I remember I think it was the end of junior year, I took a national merit exam, and they announced over the loudspeaker who the commended scholars were, and my name was on the list. And I think some of my classmates almost fell out of their chairs that my name was there, considering I wasn't apparently the scholar in their class. I ended up going on to Canisius College. I did get a scholarship for Canisius College. And again, their tuition was beyond belief if you tell somebody now what you had to have. But while I was at Canisius High School, I can't honestly say that I actually appreciated what I had.
Sure.
I went in, it was the high school. That's, you went to work. We were generally trying to get caught up on homework we might have missed. There were the kids that lived in the city and lived nearby the school seemed to be more active. I tried 1 year in the play. That wasn't my thing. There was a number of different things, but I went through without any particular, to my mind, obvious influence from Canisius High School. I was kind of happy to get out and go move on into college, which of course was more Jesuits, 4 more years there. And it was revelation, probably a number of years later, how much I actually should be grateful for what the opportunities my father sort of forced on me,
Mm-hmm.
and what the Jesuits and the scholastics and the lay faculty did for us. The concepts of work hard, it'll benefit you, and work hard or else, that kind of a thing. It was leaves I would say a set of memories in my brain that are always going to be there, and manifested themselves, the skills that I picked up that I was unaware I had actually picked them up, in terms of some of the Jesuit philosophy. My wife rues the fact that I had 10 years of Jesuit education. She says I tend to love to argue with everything. And my line is, everything, so much is learned in hindsight.
Sure.
And I now realize, because I was fairly insecure as a high school student. I was a little kid when I started. I was very short. Significantly grew more in 10th grade. But that insecurity, you might often get that, oh, well, you're going to go out in the world and you're going to be dealing with people who are better off than you, more educated or whatever. And I came to the conclusion after a number of years that my education put me second to nobody when it came to Canisius High School's preparation, and I'll say Canisius College too. I've dealt with people from many places, and many top schools. My dad went to Harvard Business, and every student who is currently at Canisius or has recently graduated should be extremely proud and confident that they're prepared to go out in the world and deal with the best of the best.
So let me ask you this. That's a great segue to sort of preparation, moving out into the world. What brought you into the field of education? Like, how did you know?
I know, it's funny. I went to Canisius College right out. In fact, in high school, I loved biology and animals. There wasn't many facilities there. I couldn't take biology at Canisius High School. They only offered physics and chemistry and a general science. I ended up going in my junior year to Williamsville High School and taking the state biology course 5 hours a day for 33 days. And that's how I got my high school biology. When I went to Canisius College, I enrolled as a bio major. And again, living my father's dream of my son, the doctor, I said I was pursuing medicine. The farther along I went, I did well, pretty well. I was inducted into the National Biological Honor Society. But as I got toward my senior year, I realized my heart wasn't in going into medicine. It just wasn't there. And I know I have many of my classmates who went on to become very successful doctors. They just had a drive and a love that I didn't. Now, what happened in college, in our senior year, myself and one of my classmates, also a friend from high school, Jim Hassett, who's now a retired physician, we were selected to teach the non-majors. They took mandatory science, and we were asked to teach their laboratory portion of their course and be involved with making up tests and grading and things like that. And we did that. That was a unique experience, but I actually loved it. It just triggered something in me.
Sure.
That I saw this as maybe a possible calling. Now, the only negative part to that was back in 1962, or 66 rather, when that was going to be coming to fruition. Teaching occupation paid very, very little comparatively with other occupations. But there are, as I said, I went to Dr. Keene, who was the director, and his son was a good friend of mine, the director of graduate studies at Canisius College, and he recommended going to Depew, said they needed science teachers were scarce everywhere. They hired me on the spot. And the rest was history. I spent right out of college at age 21, and I spent 36 years there. And it was all the side track segues that I went off into, where I think my background from Canisius High School and all were manifested. I got to the job, and that was very different because now I'm in a blue collar public school environment where maybe 1 out of 5 kids is hoping to go to college, having come from Canisius High School, where I think 99% of my class did. It was co-educational. I'm from the all-boys school. It was a different thing, and a lot of different ideas were presented to me that I'm probably weren't, and that's why I embraced the Jesuits for always telling us to strive to listen to other opinions and to respect them, even if you don't agree with them. And I remember when I'm going back to that high school debate, I remember one of the things we had to do was they gave you a topic, it was a national topic, and you had to be fully prepared to argue with all your evidence and everything for either side when you went into competition. And you didn't always know until the last minute which side. And I never realized what mental training that really was for things that were going to be coming. It was, so I got into DePue schools as the new guy, and they were just starting to get, let's say, collectively bargaining was just on the horizon coming in, the so-called Taylor Law and things. In my early years, I offered to stay in the background but be involved with it. In my 4th year teaching, they made me co-chairman of the grievance committee, which involved a lot of legal things. And in my 5th year, they made me president of the teachers organization. And to show you how you're thrown into the fire that way, the Taylor Law had come in. And anytime, what I learned from the Jesuits is, if you're going to take on a topic, give it your absolute best. And they taught me how to research. And I spent endless hours in those years, besides teaching biology, doing research on public sector law and everything. And probably one of the high points was we had a teacher file a grievance over forcible maternity leave. And I wrote they had a brand new state commission called the Human Rights Commission. And I had to, against 2 attorneys for our board, I had to write a brief and testify using that brief before the Human Rights Commission, which was new, on her behalf. And we won, which was at the time a landmark decision outside the courts and everything else. It was a commission. So I was very pleased. And I guarantee you, people say, how did you ever learn how to read that, how to write a brief? Well, that came right out of what the Jesuits taught me on research and things. And I spent over 30 years as the negotiator for the teachers organization, and was very proud we came up with a great constitution. I also, in my year as president, that was where I started doing constitutions things. I completely rewrote the Constitution and bylaws and created a different model for their organization. And I've since done that a few more times with other organizations. Again, what's that have to do with being a biology teacher? Nothing, except biology teaches you the concept of hard work and research.
Sure.
And the Jesuit training taught you, don't take a job unless you're going to do a thorough job. And they gave us language skills. Let me tell you how much all that Latin pays off, not only in vocabulary and everything, but in mental discipline as well. Did I think that then? No. Hindsight, absolutely. I said hindsight is definitely 20/20, and that was there. So I had a great career at DePue. I coached baseball for a number of years. I coached the varsity bowling team for 30 years. With we had very great, terrific teams, and eventually, after 36 years, I went into retirement. They had a incentive, a bit of an early retirement. People go, well, how do you retire at age 57? By then, our hard work had paid off to reasonable contracts and salary agreements, and the state pensions and things. If you're going to go into education, and I don't care if it's secondary or higher ed, if you're going into it to get wealthy, wrong choice. If you're going into it for satisfaction, there's nothing more satisfying than having a student that you worked with, and I used to do this for a lot of the students, get them in contact with people in higher ed that they might need. They'll come to me and say, I want to major in bio someplace. They're not giving me enough money. I'd make some phone calls, take them down there and see what worked out. I've got, last count, well over 25 students, ex-students of mine that are now doctors, including a couple of my own personal physicians. These are ex-students, know how smart they are, think they were well trained. There's nothing more satisfying than you get a note thanking you for what you did for them to boost their career. I mean, you can't put a dollar sign on that. It's just, it's not easy to comprehend unless you're doing a job like that.
Sure.
And the Depew community was wonderful. I think it still is. I live in it. And I had some tremendous students. And one of the biggest things I had to convince them was they didn't have to apologize to anybody. I'll tell you right now, I took the Jesuit philosophy and brought it to our high school when I taught. And that included JUG, my after-school detentions, mirrored Father Sturm's amazingly well. Something they had never seen. I was very demanding on the students, worked with them, taught them things. And, when I'm doing that, I'm not really thinking, this is how they were with you back in high school. You just don't realize that, how you do. And I'd like to think that our high school was better off and did definitely get some Jesuit values instilled into it.
Nice.
So that was pretty great. And then after I retired, my life got even more complicated.
And is that with your role in the New York State Golf Association?
Well, that took a little while. I got in when I retired in 2002. I had a couple of years earlier. I didn't get into playing golf until I was about 25, 26 years old, and that was just casual. I started taking it a little more seriously a few years later. I joined Lancaster Country Club, which was very conveniently located, in 1998. And I was in there for about 4 years. And then some members asked me to run for the board of directors. I didn't know why. They said, don't worry. I said, nobody knows me. They said, don't worry about it. So I got on the board of directors, and about 3 years later, I was president of the club. And while I was on the board, I was in charge of the rules, and I also rewrote their constitution and bylaws to bring them into gender compliance and a few other things. When I got involved with the rules, one of the gentlemen who was an assistant pro there said, why don't you, since you like golf rules so much, why don't you get involved with the New York State Golf Association? I mean, they'll train you and you can go out and be an official, like a golf ref, And I said, okay. He took me to a meeting, got involved, got mentored a bit, and they sent me to these USGA golf rules schools, were 4-day events. First one I went to in Ypsilanti, Michigan. The gentleman sitting next to me, who I later found out was head of rules for the USGA, informed me that when they give you a half-day exam, he informed me that it's the hardest exam you'll ever see in your life. And he was a lawyer, so he said, harder than the bar exam, and the guy next to him said, harder than my CPA exam. And I'm saying, yeah. I've taken advanced biochemistry exams. They were right. It was impossible. It was brutally difficult. I did okay on it, but you go, how can it be? Golf is the most complicated. People say it looks like a simple sport. Hit the ball, put it in the hole. And their rule book has something like 600 and some pages of decisions and all that, which they thankfully rewrote in 2019 and knocked it down to about 300 pages. But it's very, very complex, but it appealed to me. I guess rules do. I umpired softball and baseball for a few years. I eventually gave it up because I knew my temperament wasn't good for it. I was a little too argumentative myself. You can't do that if you're the ump.
Sure.
But so I got involved with the Golf Association, and after about 3 or 4 years, they asked me if I would be on the board of directors. And then after a couple of years, they made me a second vice president, and then that's 2 years each, and you generally work right up to be president. I became president January 1st of 2020, just in time to catch the entire COVID episode. I didn't catch COVID, but to have to deal with it. And so we've been doing it. And I've gone to 2 other of those 4-hour rule schools, and I'm one of a couple of senior rules officials for the state organization that lives in Western New York. And we, in a normal year, and we're hoping this is one, I travel around the state and officiate golf tournaments, and have made a number of very helpful and influential contacts. Sometimes you get to play in some pretty nice golf courses.
I bet.
If you know the right people, but
That's
yeah, there were, and all through my years in teaching, there were always side things that I did besides the negotiations of contracts. I've been very active in the church, in my parish. I was made the co-chair of their liturgical council, and one of the jobs we had to do was merge our parish with another parish, and we had to come up with a name, and I was privileged to offer the name of Blessed Mother Teresa, and they accepted it, the pastor accepted it, and the bishop accepted it, and that's the name of our parish now, is currently Saint Mother Teresa. And I was very pleased to have been the one that presented that to them. And I'm a lector and a special minister of the Eucharist, and I'm secretary of the Holy Name, so I keep myself busy that way, and have been for quite a number of years there. And at Lancaster, besides being the past president, I'm currently the historian of Lancaster Country Club. And we somehow I got segued into our property, and surrounding properties are owned by a small stock holding corporation, and there's 5 directors of that, and I'm one of them, the secretary, and we actually lease the land to the country club. So I've had to learn and dig down deep and learn a little bit about, in fact, learn a lot about corporate, New York State corporate stock law. So my wife always keeps kidding me. I keep getting into things that require a great deal of research and work. None of them pay anything, of course. I seem to love. I've been retired 19 years, and I can't imagine how anybody stays inactive while they're in retirement.
Sure. Well, given your background in teaching, and given your background and just sort of administration of all different ways, as you know, last final question. Ideally, this video will be seen by a lot of our young alums and our alumni all over the U.S., and some of whom are just starting out in the world. Can you offer 1 or 2 pieces of advice to young people today as they begin their careers?
Yes, I think so. One, try to appreciate what you have. You may very well go through high school and just think you're just there, and it's, it can be annoying many days and all that. You've got the recent graduates and the current students have a wonderful opportunity that we really, in the old days, didn't have nearly that many. That's one. But I think every student needs to understand that they have a destiny and a role to play in the big picture of our society. The trick is to find something that you really want to do and enjoy, and set that as your goal. And that might not happen right away. I mean, many people come out of high school, and well, most at Canisius High School would be going on to college of some form. And you might initially just grab a job because it pays some bills and you need that. If you find yourself in a position where maybe the money's fine, maybe it's not, but you don't really like going to work, that's going to make your life miserable. I can tell you right now, there's no dollar sign you can put on the misery in a job, and vice versa. There's no way you can say dollars cover you when you're doing something that you enjoy. When you go to work every day and it doesn't seem that much like work, and it's very satisfying, I can't tell you enough. And I'm telling students, anybody that asks me, and I used to tell my own students when they were near graduation, keep plugging away. You will find your role. It's there. It's things right now are in upheaval. We have nothing in the last 100 years to look back on. We can't ask anybody my age, oh, what was it like when you had 2 years of pandemic? Well, we never did that. We never had that. I mean, any advice we can offer is all based on history, going back to the pandemic of the late 1910s. The other one that might seem like a practical one is, if you think you're going to get married, marry well. Be very, very careful. It's so important, if you're going to get married, to pick a life partner who will support you and bring joy to you for your whole life. My wife and I have been married now just about 53 years. If you have children, there's no greater joy than watching them grow. Well, some days it's maybe not so much. There are times when it's not always a great joy.
Sure.
Generally when they start high school around that age. But and the other thing that I know the Jesuits pushed, and it's always been part of my life, is keep God as the focal point of your life, and emphasize love and service to your fellow people. If you put yourself first all the time, your life's going to be pretty miserable, unless you're just a narcissist. And then you may like it, but everybody around you will be miserable. But if you keep that spiritual focal center and the values, which I'll say this, Canisius High School taught, but it's not just a matter of teaching. You can tell people about it, but they made you live it. That gives you're never alone. If you've got God on your side and things are going bad, you won't feel alone. We've had some issues, and my wife's she's been fighting a cancer diagnosis and seems to be doing well with it. But besides COVID, now we've had 8 months of chemos and all that kind of things too. Nobody here, we don't lose heart. It's been a spiritual test, sure. But we don't feel alone. It's wonderful. And I go back to my own personal feelings. My wife, of course, has her own background, but I look back, I thank my parents because they were that way. And if you had told me in high school that I would value all the what I called blah, blah, blah stuff that they were telling us during religion class and whatever. And it carries over because the Jesuits carried over into Canisius College too. And their message was life-changing, it really was. Didn't know it then, but I realize it now. And I am eternally grateful for what they have. I think they would be happy with the outcome that they got out of me. And I'll bet you when I was in high school, they might not have guessed anything going on. I mean, obviously for some reason, I keep getting picked for these leadership roles and I never seek them out. But something that they imbued in me, I guess, apparently has rubbed off. And I'll tell you, I think what it is. It's not anything more than the fact that any job I take on, they know I work like crazy to accomplish it. And that was instilled in high school. And now I've got a lot of responsibility we've got about 35,000 golfers officially as part of our organization. And there's a lot of responsibility, but it's great fun. It's a terrific hobby. And I've met some of the smartest and most wonderful people that are involved with this also. I always root for Jordan Spieth, from graduate of Dallas Jesuit. Golf is an amazing sport. It's a real test of character. And I've seen the best and I've seen the worst in people. But
Well,
we can thank, I can thank what they have given us in terms of a value system.
well, I appreciate all the time you spent with us today, Joe. It has been great to visit with you, hear a little bit about not only your career as a teacher, but what you're doing now. And I very much admire somebody that's always learning, always pushing, and always moving forward. So you've been a great inspiration. Hopefully to all of the alums will see this. So thank you very much for spending the time with us today, and stay in touch. And I look forward to hearing what's next.
Andy, thanks a lot, and my best to everybody at Canisius High School and their futures.
We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.